Guilty as charged.
Guilty as charged.
Guilty as charged.
Guilty as charged. That's my guy.
Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven, and I am your host, a solo host today. We postponed our Thursday show because Tyler has been out sick. We thought that he was going to be much better today, and unfortunately, he is not. So, last minute, cancellation here, last minute change. Sometimes you make a little pivot. So I will be doing a solo show today, and appreciate you guys for jumping in, supporting the show as always. Make sure like, subscribe, all that good stuff continues to help our show can continue to reach more people, and tell a friend, all that good stuff. Before we get to our free agency show, so we were going to do a more comprehensive show with like 25 players on here. So it's just me. I decided to lean into my little niche here of being the offensive line guy. So we're going to talk about some offensive line free agent targets for the Chargers that we can run through here today. So we all know the Chargers have a big problem, and free agency is a good way where they can potentially go out and solve that. So before we get there, of course, I have to give a quick shout out to our friends over at PrizePicks. Obviously, tomorrow's game is the big game. It is the finale of the football season, and PrizePicks is doing a big game max discount this week in honor of the big game. So PrizePicks has a special discount for Drake May. All he has to do is hit one single passing yard for the max discount to cash in. After that, all you have to do is add one other player to your lineup, and if your picks hit, you can cash in. Obviously, you can add, as many players as you want up to that point. If you want to do 5 players, 6 players, whatever the case may be. You can also stack Drake May if you're all invested on his rushing total, for example. I think that personally is a good play this week, given the how the games have gone for the Patriots so far this postseason. You can do that as well. So last opportunity for football on PrizePicks of the season. Definitely encourage you to go check it out. PrizePicks is available in over 45 states, including California, Florida, and Georgia. So please go check it out. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code GUILTY to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's code GUILTY to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Don't miss out on the big game discount this week with Drake May, one single passing yard. Shout out to PrizePicks for supporting the show this week and every single week going forward. Okay, so we'll do some offensive line candidates here, and then we'll take some questions from the chat as we do usually on Saturdays. We'll probably be here for about an hour-ish, so feel free and let me know if there's a guy that you think I missed, or somebody you think is maybe flying under the radar a little bit. Some people talking about the coaching news. Tyler and I have kind of decided to wait until everything is official that way. Obviously, the Adam Gase thing is very weird. So we'll see how that goes. Nothing official there. When those hirings are official, we'll talk about that on the podcast probably next week. Okay, so let's start with the big fish, Mr. Tyler Linderbaum, the Baltimore Ravens center. There's a few Baltimore Ravens that are free agents that I think make a lot of sense for the Chargers, and not just because they're Ravens and there's that connection, but because they're good players. But Tyler Linderbaum to me is the big fish. There are a lot of rumors online that the Giants are going to go all in on Tyler Linderbaum, and that the Chargers are going to be right there in that conversation as well, and potentially the Ravens too. So the Ravens are in a tricky situation with the offensive line where they are not very good on that front. The personnel has definitely taken a decline over the last few years, and losing Tyler Linderbaum, is very Ravens-esque because it would get them a nice, hefty compensatory pick. But if they lose him, you're talking about potentially one of the worst offensive lines in the league as you pivot towards the new Jesse Minter era, and you have a first-time offensive coordinator. So the Ravens are going to have to pay up and break some front office tendencies if they want to keep Tyler Linderbaum, because like I said, Giants, Chargers are going to be, flush with cash, have the connections, and willing to spend to potentially lure him away from Baltimore. What's interesting with Tyler Linderbaum is that, we were talking about potentially one of the best centers in the league, heading into the 2024 season, and 2024 was a great season for him continue to be on that track. And like several Ravens had a down year this past season, still, high rankings in particular in ESPN's metrics in pass block win rate. He was fourth on PFS run blocking grades. He was fourth among 31 qualified centers. But you look at his pressures allowed and his pass blocking efficiency rating in 2025, it was a severe decline in that regard. So it was 97.2 in 2025, which was 27th out of 31. He was 2 spots better than Bradley Bozeman, for what it's worth. But in 2024, when he was, having his best season, it was 98.4, which was 6th out of 28. So generally speaking, that number, we've gotten some questions about that because we use that number a lot. It's PFF's metric of how many pass blocking snaps you are allowing a pressure, a hurry, or a sack on, and then they kind of formulate that pressure. So you start at 100, and then every time you allow a pressure, that number goes down. Generally speaking, among the center position, if you can be above 98, then you're doing great. Like that is a top-notch center. It's obviously what Corey Linsley was when he was with the Chargers. So 98 is where you want to be and above to have like a truly good and potentially great center. 97.5 is kind of acceptable. It's about average. So you want to be between that 97.5 and above range to have at least an average center. Bradley Bozeman was at like 97 this year. So it is what it is. I think the question with Tyler Linderbaum is how much of an aberration was 2025 for him. A lot of Baltimore people I've talked to or seen online have discussed that, you're playing next to Daniel Falele, you're playing next to Andrew Voorhees, 2 players who are not super positive in their own right. But you look at Tyler Linderbaum's numbers in just one-on-one situations, and they were a severe decline from the previous season as well. So I think that you still trust that Tyler Linderbaum is a really good player. Again, some of the metrics still point to that in terms of pass block win rate on ESPN, as well as his run blocking grade. I think you still highlight him as the guy, because if you can get him back to that 2024 performance, you're talking about having potentially an elite center under contract for 4 years and beyond and hitting his prime. And I think that's the big distinction between Linderbaum and any other free agent that we're talking about, is that he is the guy who is going to be on a second contract, who could still give you, the next 7 to 8 years of still being a really high level player. And the upside here is just too, worth the swing if you're the Chargers in particular. A lot of people have talked about the scheme with the Ravens. Obviously under Greg Roman, they did a ton of gap scheme runs, a lot of power, a lot of pin and pull, things like that. Under Todd Monken over the last couple of years, they've been a lot more into the wide zone world. And so I think there's a lot of scheme versatility for Tyler Linderbaum. Obviously at Iowa, he was like exclusively wide zone. So it is definitely a player who is worth the money if you're the Chargers, again, who have had this center problem for the last few years, ever since Lindsey's heart problem, and throwing a big chunk of change at Tyler Linderbaum is definitely worth it. So PFF projects him as a 4-year, $80 million contract, resetting the center market, which I think is, again, very well deserved. The question is really, how high is that number going to get? Because somebody like, different positions, right? But Milton Williams last year was projected to be around $20 million, but then the Patriots and the Panthers and all of these other teams were throwing money at him. And so he ends up going for like $26 million. I could see a similar situation happening with Linderbaum, where, yeah, he's projected for $20 million per year, but maybe he signs for 23, 24 because there are 3 teams who are connected to him and who need a center and could drive his market way up. So I think that there's a real chance we see him just like shatter the number that Creed Humphrey got a couple of years ago. And we're talking about one of the biggest contracts in this free agency cycle. But for the Chargers specifically, you're going from potentially the worst starting center in the league to ideally like a top 5 center, which is definitely worth paying for that kind of upgrade if you're the Chargers. Next one here is Connor McGovern. So to me, when you're approaching this free agency cycle for the Chargers, I think priority number 1 is to see if you can get Linderbaum. And I think priority number 2 is see if you can get Connor McGovern. And I was talking with somebody online yesterday, and they were saying like, oh man, if they don't get Linderbaum, it's going to be such a disappointment. And my answer to that is not if they get McGovern, because McGovern, you look at his numbers, they are right there neck and neck, if not better than what Tyler Linderbaum was doing. I don't think he is as physically gifted as somebody like McGovern. I don't think he truly has the ceiling to be like the best center in the league. But this is definitely one of the 10 best centers in the league. This is definitely a very, very above average center. The numbers over the last 2 years in particular have been really, really strong. He was fifth in ESPN's pass block win rate this past season, and he was third in 2024. So it's a really, really strong number there. His pass blocking efficiency rating we just talked about was 98.6 in this past season, which was 7th out of 31 qualified centers. And in 2024, he was 12th. So you're talking about a borderline top 10, maybe top 6 or 7 center who is really, really good in pass protection. The bigger concern for him is he's not particularly great in terms of the run blocking metrics. He's not in the ESPN's top 10 win rates there. His pass blocking grade was, or his run blocking grade, was 12th this season. His splits in run blocking between zone and gap scheme and was about 50-50 this past season, but his gap scheme grade was a lot higher than his zone grade. So potentially something to keep in mind there for the Chargers as they make this pivot to potentially being a lot more wide zone heavy. But I think McGovern is versatile enough and effective enough as a pass protector that you still make this addition 10 times out of 10. PFF does not have a contract prediction up for him at this current time. But Over the Cap has this great feature on every player who, if you search their contract history, you can pull up their valuation based off of this past season. And McGovern's was at 11.5 million APY based off of his numbers that they are pulling. There's a lot of partnership between PFF and Over the Cap, so that's where kind of they get a lot of their statistics and performance from, games played, etc. So 11.5 million for McGovern, potentially, maybe that ramps up to 13, 14 to pull him away from Buffalo. But still, you're talking about, maybe saving $5 to $7 to $8 million in cap space from going from Linderbaum to McGovern, who will be on his third contract as opposed to his second contract. So financially, it makes a lot of sense that way. His numbers are about equal there. The production over the last 2 years, like I said, has been elite, and he's been incredibly durable. 3 years in Buffalo, 1 year in Dallas, where he's played 1,000 snaps each of the last 4 seasons. So there's a ton to like here about Connor McGovern. He's played a lot. His pass protection is significantly better than what the Chargers have been dealing with. And he can also play guard, where he started his career in Dallas. So you could potentially sign him and then let the draft, cards fall as they may. And if you want to draft another guard, great. But if you are sitting there in the second round and Connor Lew or one of those guys is falling to you and you want to draft him, you can have McGovern play center for this year, and then next year you pivot him to guard and Lew play center, etc. Just gives him a lot of flexibility that way. So I'm a big fan of Connor McGovern. The Bills, I think, are in a situation where one of McGovern or Edwards are going to hit free agency. Their cap situation is not great. And they have been preparing for those two players leaving. They drafted Cedric Van Pran a couple of years ago. They have Alec Anderson, who they really like, to potentially play guard or center as well. So there's a pretty good chance that McGovern hits free agency. And if Linderbaum also hits free agency, then you're talking about a really good spot for the Chargers where they could be in negotiations for two great options at center. So don't sleep on Connor McGovern. I don't think this is a consolation prize for the Chargers. I think this is more of kind of a 1A and 1B situation, to be completely honest with you. So I'm a big fan of his. I think it makes a ton of sense for the Chargers and the Bills, like Eddie's pointing out in the chat. That they do not have the situation where they can keep both of these players, and I'm interested in both of those guys. So interesting to keep in mind there for Connor McGovern. We got Tyler in the chat. He says he saw the Adam Gase news and got sick. Yeah, not fun. A lot of kids at Tyler's school are dealing with some illnesses. So always fun to work in education that way. All right, next here is Mr. David Edwards. You look at some of his statistics from this past season. So I think overall as a player, he is kind of a notch down from Connor McGovern, but still would be a significant increase in production for the Chargers on the interior spot. He was 10th in ESPN's run block win rate this season, and he was 7th in 2024. He's definitely more well known as a run blocker than a pass protector for what it's worth. He's still, I would say, at least above average in pass protection, 97.2 this past season, which is 30th out of 60. The previous season was 97.8, which I think was 18th or 19th, if I'm not mistaken. His pass blocking grade, for what it's worth, is a lot higher. He was the 11th highest graded pass blocker, according to PFF. And then he was 66.3 run blocking, which was 26th. So similar to Connor McGovern, this is a guy on his second contract, or his third contract, excuse me. He is a bit of an older player. He has been mostly very durable. There were some seasons with the Rams where he wasn't really starting. And then his first season in Buffalo, which is 3 years ago, he actually got hurt in week 2 and missed the bulk of the season. Outside of that, he's played over 1,000 snaps in basically every other season. And then the run blocking reputation, I think, for the Chargers is going to be really important to how they kind of figure this part out, because the pass protection scheme is going to be very friendly for the offensive line in general. They're not going to have the same kind of diagnosing issues as they had under the previous regime, and things in this system are just a lot easier in that standpoint. The rules are much more clear. So if you're trying to maximize your offensive line and you know your pass protection is going to be solid just based off of scheme and plan, getting a run blocker like David Edwards, I think, could make a ton of sense for you, and just kind of supercharge, the left side with him. And, we'll see what happens with Joe Alter, Rashawn Slater, right? But both of those guys are really, really strong run blockers in their own right. And David Edwards would just continue to add to that. There is definitely some scheme overlap for David Edwards. He played with the Rams. Sean McVay, Mike McDaniel come up in the same kind of system. There's a lot of overlap there. And I think it will be very interesting to see as Mike McDaniel and Jim Harbaugh kind of mesh their two systems. Somebody like David Edwards, who's played in very wide zone heavy with the Rams back in the day, and the Bills, who are kind of a 50-50 split. They do a ton of pin and pull, ton of gap, ton of power. Getting somebody like him who's experienced both sides there, I think, would be very useful for them. And I think just it makes a lot of sense in that regard. The numbers are not indicative of like a significant upgrade from Zion. From what I can gather, messaging back and forth with like the Cover One guys who do great work for the covering the Bills, Edwards' issues are a little bit more just kind of one-on-one related as opposed to stunts and things like that. But I think this is a guy who can still give you a lot of significant value. PFF's contract prediction for him is 3 years, $35 million, which would be the 21st ranked guard. So you're potentially getting a really nice upgrade without having to pay the sticker price of a Tyler Linderbaum and stuff like that. So, you're getting kind of a value here with David Edwards and potentially, helping out. And he can play both guard spots for what it's worth. Next one here is Isaac Seumalu, the interior offensive lineman from Pittsburgh. The numbers here for Seumalu are insanely good for over the last 2 seasons, especially on ESPN. He's the only guard that has ranked in the top 10 in ESPN's pass block win rate and run block win rate in each of the last 2 years. The only guard to do that over the last 2 years is Isaac Seumalu. He finished this past season with a 97.5 pass blocking efficiency rating, which is 20th out of 60 of qualified guards. His pass blocking grade was 76.4. Run blocking grade was 67.1, which is 23rd. The numbers look great. And Isaac Seumalu, when he's been on the field, has been a very, very productive and effective offensive lineman for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have also been preparing for his potential departure. They've drafted a lot of guys like Mason McCormick and et cetera, Zach Frazier. So there's a pretty good chance that they are able to let him walk in free agency. And you're getting, whoever signs him is getting a super highly productive guard over the last 4 years, with the ability, with the balance between what the Eagles were doing when he was there and what the Steelers were doing. He's another guy who has a lot of gap and power overlap. But his best 2 seasons in terms of run blocking have been the last 2 seasons in Pittsburgh, where they've been over 60% zone under Arthur Smith. So I think this is a very clean schematic fit. I think he's a really, really good player. He's almost played exclusively at left guard. And so that could potentially be a concern for you about how, in this scenario, maybe you're bringing Zion Johnson back and adding Isaac Seumalu. How do you sort that out? Could be potentially a concern. But the Chargers just need more talent on offensive line. So it shouldn't be that too hard to convince them that he's a good player. The risks come with his age. He'll be 33 in October, and his health. He has missed, generally speaking, about 3 to 6 games in each of his, basically in every year of his career outside of 3 seasons. So you're talking about an age concern, you're talking about health concerns. If you sign Isaac Seumalu, he will definitely help your team. He will definitely upgrade your offensive line, but you've got to have a backup plan because that guy is going to be on the field at some point next season. Seumalu has just not shown the ability to stay on the field consistently. That and his age are why he's probably only costing $8 million per year, according to PFF's metrics. So for the Chargers, in this instance, you could easily justify bringing Zion back, signing Isaac Seumalu, and maybe even something else. So there's going to be some balancing here. Obviously, if you sign Tyler Linderbaum, you're probably not going to be signing another high-end player. So maybe this is like a Linderbaum and Isaac Seumalu pairing, and then you replace Zion in the draft kind of deal. So Seumalu for me is more of a pairing with Linderbaum or with Edwards, where you're getting an expensive guard or center, and then you kind of back it up with a veteran contract here. But again, you have to understand the risks that this guy is probably going to miss some games for the Chargers, but very, very good player. The numbers back that up. I remember watching Steelers film for the Chargers game when they played this year, and Seumalu is really, really good. Very consistent player. So it really is just the age and the injuries there. Next year, Elijah Vera-Tucker, very big risk here, but if you're trying to find the highest possible ceiling in free agency, you could argue that Elijah Vera-Tucker is that guy. 98.3 pass blocking efficiency rating in 2024, which was 5th out of 55 qualified guards, and then 76.3 run blocking grade was 11th. The numbers are really, really good. I forgot to add ESPN's metrics in here, but I'm pretty sure that they're fairly good as well. Obviously, you have the Chad Alexander connection. He's another guy who has played under the Shanahan kind of offense with Mike LaFleur, obviously the Cardinals head coach now. This past season with Tanner Engstrand, obviously he ended up getting hurt, but you're talking about a ton of, Shanahan influence in Elijah Vera-Tucker's schematic background, if you will. And he's a guy who has played tackle in the NFL. So he gives you that kind of position flex that the Chargers really like. The problem are the 3 season-ending injuries. You're talking about 2 torn triceps, each arm, and then also a torn Achilles. So you're talking about a guy who's missed a ton of time in his NFL career for the New York Jets, and I think that's the big reason why they're going to potentially let him walk. And you're having to pay a premium for him at 4 years, $70 million, 17.5 APY. That's a lot of money for a guy who has missed 3 full seasons in his NFL career. And that number might surprise people. I have seen some Chargers fans online suggest, oh, you can, pay Elijah Vera-Tucker $12 million. He's coming off season injury. I will continue to say this. Aaron Banks got $19 million last year in free agency, and he is objectively below average. Like, he's a guy whose numbers are significantly worse than Zion Johnson and is not nearly a run blocker kind of player that Zion Johnson is. So Elijah Vera-Tucker, because of his ceiling, is going to get paid a premium amount of money, and then the team is just going to try and deal with the injury. So it's a big, medical red flag, but there are schematic connections here. There are obviously the front office connections with Chad Alexander. He is from USC. There's enough here where I think you can talk about him being an option for the Chargers. But again, you've got to be very sure that he passes your medical test in order for you to be comfortable with that kind of contract evaluation. So again, I get it. That price is a lot with the injuries. That's where the guard market is right now. You're paying a premium for a guy who can be an elite guard potentially, and that sucks. That's a lot of risk. But that's where we're at with Mr. Elijah Vera-Tucker. Okay, before I continue, our audio audience is going to take a quick break, and then I'll be right back after this with more offensive line free agency targets. All right, next up here is Ed Ingram, a very popular name among Chargers Twitter right now. And I kind of get it, I kind of don't. Ed Ingram had a career season for the Houston Texans this year, particularly with the run blocking perspective. 79.9 run blocking grade, was sixth in the offensive line. I don't know why I forgot to put the ESPN numbers on here, but he was top 10 in run blocking among interior offensive line on ESPN as well. The biggest concern is the pass protection was still a major issue. This past season was 97.0 in pass blocking efficiency rating, which was 38th out of 60. That was a career high. A career high, folks, was 97.0. The Vikings essentially shipped him off for free because he was so bad in Minnesota that they just could not fathom the idea of having him on their team anymore. His previous best season in pass blocking efficiency was 96.1, which was last. It was much lower than what Mekhi Becton was for the Chargers this year. So he's a great run blocker. Seems like he's found a home in Houston. I think the run blocking and the power perspective here makes a lot of sense for other teams. And I think the Chargers kind of pivoting towards a zone-based system probably make this a no. And again, they'll be in a much better pass protection situation. I think you trust Butch Berry to get the most out of guys, to a certain extent. But Ed Ingram, to me, is just not worth the risk from a pass protection standpoint. And then the run blocking was about average in Minnesota, where it was a zone offense. And then this past season is where he took off, and Houston was a much firmer power gap scheme offense, I should say. So questioning the fit wise. Thomas Martinez pointing out in the chat, there are some lengthy character concerns with Ed Ingram as well. And all of this is adding up to him reportedly, being worth $18 million on the open market. So this is a hard no for me. I just am not interested enough here with the pass protection concerns, with the 1 year of good run blocking, and then the accusations as well. I'm very uncomfortable, paying him this kind of contractual upside with all of the red flags here. So a lot of Chargers fans are talking about him. I'm only bringing him up because of that. This is a hard no for me. I think the Chargers can find better value elsewhere, and I think Ed Ingram can be paid by some other team that kind of contract. So I'm just not very interested in Ed Ingram this year. Next one here is Wyatt Teller. Looks like I forgot to finish this slide, so that's my bad. Wyatt Teller, lengthy history in a very similar scheme with Kevin Stefanski. He is obviously getting older, but he is still just 31 years old. So he's played a ton of football, but he is still just 31 years old. This past season was 97.0 in pass blocking efficiency rating, 38th out of 60, 65.7 run blocking, which was 29th. That's generally speaking about where he has been. His first 2 years in Cleveland were like awesome, and he looked like he was going to be one of the next guys. But it's not been that productive since. Still a good player, but this is definitely a situation where you're probably paying more of a Isaac Seumalu 1 year kind of $8 to $10 million contract, as opposed to paying high end money. So there's a lot of connections here from a schematic standpoint. Mike McDaniel obviously was in Cleveland, but much earlier than when Wyatt Teller was there. But I think there's enough of a draw there where you could pull him away from Cleveland, and the Browns cap situation is horrendous because of the Deshaun Watson contract. So they will not be able to afford Wyatt Teller, even if he is going to be like a $10 million kind of contract. I could see them running in the back with like Tevin Jenkins, who's not on this slideshow, at like a minimum contract like they did this last year, starting him and then drafting somebody else, etc. So Wyatt Teller, similar situation for Isaac Seumalu for me, where this is probably, an addition to somebody else. And I think for the Chargers, this makes a lot of sense just from a contractual standpoint. I know that we're all going to want to put them with every expensive free agent, but it's just not plausible to pay everybody. But if you get Linderbaum or McGovern and Teller, or Zion and Teller, and then you draft your center, I think that's a pretty good situation. Taylor's played a lot of football. He's been very durable. He's solid, but not, spectacular. And I think for the Chargers, you're just trying to clear that line, right? Like we make the Bud Dupree joke, but it's the Mekhi Becton joke. You just can't be worse than Mekhi Becton. And you'll be in a much better spot going forward with this group. So Wyatt Taylor, I think, is definitely on my list, on my radar for the Chargers. Cole Strange, I think, deserves a mention here, not because he's like a surefire starter. I'm not suggesting that. But he had a really good season for Miami after they claimed him. Obviously, the Patriots cut him. He signs with the Browns practice squad. And then the Dolphins are dealing with the Liam Eichenberg situation. So they sign him from the Browns practice squad to the active roster. He played a lot of football for them this season. Was 97.4 pass blocking efficiency rating, was 24th out of 60. So again, a lot of that is the scheme in Miami, helping him out. 57 run blocking grade, was 39th out of 60 guards this year. So this is not necessarily going to blow anybody away. But given the McDaniel connection, given that he played his best football under Butch Berry, I think it makes a lot of sense for the Chargers as kind of a swing backup option. He has 1,500 snaps at left guard, 117 at center, where I think he was originally drafted to play, but then the Patriots just didn't. They had other options, and then 800 at right guard. So the Chargers are going to need a lot of depth options here. That's not just starters. Like they only, assuming they cut Bradley Bozeman and Mekhi Becton, you're talking about the only players being under contract officially for the Chargers being Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater, because they haven't really drafted anybody. So they're going to need to fill out the room, not just get starters here. Cole Strange as your swing into your guy, to me, makes a lot of sense, just given the familiarity and the coaching connection there. The Patriots' tenure was definitely very up and down. The Patriots cutting him is probably not a good sign for where he was at. But again, things change here. Probably talking about a vet minimum contract. I think for the Chargers, who, again, I think part of this is you're trying to get some hyper athletes in here. You're trying to get some pedigree in here. They love drafting adding former first round picks. So hypothetically speaking, if like Trevor Penning is your swing tackle, Cole Strange is your swing interior guy, you add a backup center elsewhere, I think that's a pretty good spot for the Chargers into this scheme. And again, they're not going to be able to rebuild everything in year one, but Cole Strange, I think, is definitely worth monitoring in that regard. Another connection here with Butch Berry, although I'm not sure how positive it is Mr. Dalton Risner, the interior offensive lineman from the Bengals. He had just had a career season in Cincinnati, which is kind of crazy considering, he's played in some very scheme-friendly systems in Denver as well as Minnesota. He had a 98.0 pass blocking efficiency rating, which was 8th out of 60 in 2025. Career high again there. Career high run block grade this year of 69, which was 17th. Nice. He's never really been known as like a super high-end run blocker. He's definitely always been more of a pass protector. But for the Chargers, I think, again, this could make a lot of sense as an addition to pair with somebody else. I don't believe he's going to cost a whole lot given his age. And he's never really been a long-term guy. The last two contracts he's signed have both been in August. So he is not going to cost you a whole lot of money. And he is going to be a very, efficient pass protector, which gives the Chargers a lot of value. Again, the system will be a lot more pass friendly for the offensive line. Run blocking wise, I think they can work it out. He's basically split, half and half here with like zone and gap scheme over his course of his career. Obviously, Zach Taylor comes from the Sean McVay world, so there is some schematic overlap here with Dalton Risner. The question with Butch Berry is really how positive is that connection? As we talked about when the Chargers hired him, there were reports that Thomas Martinez brought up that the Broncos players cheered his release, which again, is that a Nat Hackett thing or is that a Butch Berry thing? We'll never know. But there is a connection, and I think that's worth pointing out. For the most part, in Denver, he was exclusively the left guard. And then his first year in Minnesota, he played left guard. And then the last 2 years, he's played right guard. Maybe that coincides with him having a career season. I'm not quite sure. But that does obviously give you a lot of flexibility for the Chargers where you could play left guard, right guard. And then obviously the familiarity with the scheme with Zach Taylor and Kevin O'Connell over the past few seasons in Minnesota and Cincinnati, respectively. I believe this is my last one here. Again, not suggesting Daniel Brunskill as a starter at all, but worth bringing up because there are so many different connections here with the Chargers. 5 seasons with Mike McDaniel in San Francisco and Miami, respectively. This past season, he only played 39 offensive line snaps, but had 121 as a jumbo tight end, which I think is interesting because we haven't really talked about how often McDaniel did that in Miami. So he's definitely a fit in that regard. I saw a quote that Butch Berry called him a great locker room guy, great veteran to have around. And I think specifically in a world where the Chargers add guards in free agency, and let's say Tyler Linderbaum signs with the Giants and then McGovern stays in Buffalo, for example, you're out of kind of center options in free agency. I think somebody like Daniel Brunskill can make some sense as your backup center, and then you go draft your starter in the first, second, third round, probably not first round, probably second or third round in this class. It's a great center class from everything that I can tell. Thomas Martinez can talk about that as well in the chat. So Brunskill to me is like your 8th, 9th offensive lineman, specifically potentially your backup center, where his best season in Tennessee happened in 2024. We had a 98.5 pass blocking efficiency rating. And I think that's kind of my selling point for him. He has over 1,000 snaps at center, 3,000 at right guard, can play left guard as well. But this is somebody to keep in mind as the Chargers go to fill out their locker room and their offensive line unit and potentially a backup center. So, there's been a lot of questions about, okay, so you signed Tyler Linderbaum, who's your backup? Do you want to draft somebody super early? Do you not, since you only have the 5 picks, which is TBD? I'm assuming Joe Ortiz is going to trade down. So somebody like Brunskill makes a lot of sense in that regard, where you pay him a vet minimum contract. He's familiar with the scheme. He can help the offensive line. The other guys kind of, proliferate. Hello, my goodness, I can't speak right now. And you guys know what I'm saying. Anyways, he'll help with the scheme translation with the rest of the guys, given his familiarity with the system. So again, not a starter, but somebody I think is worth bringing up. All right. That is everything that I have here with the offensive line, guys. So if you have any questions, I will take questions here. We'll have some super chats as well. Regarding the center class, Thomas Martinez says that there are so many centers in this class. There's at least 3 guys that can start immediately on from day 2. Yeah. I'm a big fan of Connor Lew, obviously coming off of the injury. He is, to me, the top center. Fitness is making fun of my pronunciation there. Yeah, that's a tough word, man. I don't know. So Connor Lew is a really good, effective player. Duke Manyweather has Sam Hecht from Kansas State as the top center. He obviously goes to bat for his guys, but I really enjoyed his film as well. And then you have, Logan Jones, you have Christian Parker from Duke, etc. I have not watched Parker yet. I will get there, but Logan Jones is good. I think even Coogan from Indiana is a good option on day 3. So this center class there's no Creed Humphrey kind of player in it. But this is a really, really good, effective center class where you can, again, in a very scheme-friendly system, draft some value here and go forward. So you have 2 centers in free agency. I think where the Chargers have to decide where they're at, really with the offensive line is how aggressive do you want to be with the center position in free agency? Because, there's like Cade Mays and Ethan Postage and things like that. I think there are some concerns there with like where you're going to potentially get value, and Cade Mays has only started like 6 or 7 games, I want to say. And so if you miss out on the top 2 guys, to me, you pivot to bringing Zion back, and then you sign Teller or Isaac Seumalu, somebody like that. Those 2 are your guards. You get 2 above average guards that way. And then you go draft your starting center in the 2nd or 3rd round to solidify your group. So you could potentially have an offensive line where you're talking about Slater and Alt at the tackle spots. We'll see what happens left and right. Zion, let's say Connor Lew in the 2nd round, and then Wyatt Teller and then you fill out your backups with a guy like Cole Strange, Brunskill, other draft picks, etc., plus Butch Berry, plus Mike McDaniel. I think that's a really good spot to be in, a much better spot than what they were in last year with Bradley Bozeman and Mekhi Becton, and then obviously all the injuries at offensive tackle. So very early in the process, we'll update some contract projections as we go through, as PFF does that as well, and over the cap, and then we'll have a full grasp of where the Chargers are at in that regard. Yeah, so it should be fun. It's a good year for the Chargers to upgrade the offensive line. Much better than last year, where the free agency class was bad and the draft was bad. So this year, the free agency guard group, really good. You have two strong centers in it. And then draft, I think you have both, guard and center are really, really strong as well, where you can get a lot of value, a lot of starters at any point throughout the first probably 4 rounds-ish. All right, get to some questions here. 4 super chats right off the bat from Daddy Don't Pull Out. Wants to know, why wasn't Trevor Penning giving a good chance at guard? I don't think he's very good at guard. Personally, I think his main issue is getting to his landing spots at the proper moment. He does not have a ton of urgency out of his stance, and when you're at tackle, you have a lot more space to kind of make up that difference. You have chip help, you have other things like that you can manage. He's got the long arms. So he's very similar to Trey Pipkins in that regard. Trey really struggles to get to his launching point on time every time. But he's so big and his arms are so long that he can kind of make up the difference there. So when you're at guard, if you're slow out of your stance against high-end defensive tackles, which every team has 2 or 3 of these days nowadays, it's going to cause you a lot of problems with your leverage. It's going to cause you a lot of problems with your power, with your ability to anchor. So Trevor Penning, to me, is firmly a tackle. I think, especially in this specific scheme, I think he'll be a much better tackle than he was in New Orleans with this coaching staff. And I'm not opposed to them going out and exploring an upgrade, but I also am not opposed to him coming back as the swing tackle. Again, they have a lot of spots they got to figure out. They're not going to be able to go out and get, taking a long-term swing tackle is just not really on my radar in the draft, because they have so many other needs that they got to sort out. So vet minimum contract for Trevor Penning, I think, is not the worst thing in the world for the Chargers in that spot. Mr. Chow Chow says he still prefers Zion over all of these free agent guards. I think I would say David Edwards is better than Zion, and I think his pass protection is probably similar, but run blocking is definitely better in terms of the metrics. I think Zion is a very good run blocker. Don't get me wrong; it's the strength of his game. But I think that's a close conversation. I think Isaac Seumalu has the track record of a very high-end production that he would be better. But again, the injury risk there, and then obviously Elijah Vera-Tucker, significantly higher ceiling at this point in time, but dealing with the injury. So if you prefer the safety of Zion and what you're getting, that he has been a very, very reliable player for the last 4 years, I don't necessarily disagree here. But I think Zion and his price tag is going to be very interesting to monitor, where this guard class and the market is just going to be really interesting to watch, because the league went crazy last year with Aaron Banks and Will Fries and guys who don't have the athletic upside and draft pedigree of a guy like Zion. And Aaron Banks, like I said, is a significantly worse player to me. So does Zion pass those guys, or does he kind of settle back into, the $15 million range? And I know a lot of Chargers fans have said that that's like the max they would pay. And I think that's a fair contract to me. Like a 3-year $30 million, or that would be 3-year $45 million contract for Zion, I think makes a lot of sense. Daddy Don't Pull Out says, convince Chargers legend Ode Ibushi to unretire. Yeah, shout out to Ode. I actually still converse with him every once in a while on Instagram and on Twitter. He's another one of these NFL guards that has lost a lot of weight. I think he posted the other day on Instagram that he's like 220 right now. So that will not be happening for Ode Ibushi, but wish him nothing but the best. It's so funny to me. He played 4 games for the Chargers, and everybody's like, we love him still. So it's great. Devin wants to know if scheme coaching overcome personnel deficiency. I think to a certain extent they can. If you look at San Francisco and how they have operated all these years, like they never really have a lot of the pass protection issues that teams like the Chargers do. Again, scheme helps a lot there. And they really have like one great player in Trent Williams and one pretty good player in Dominic Pooney. And that's about it. Like their other guys are all backups in, on other teams. And obviously Aaron Banks, gets a huge contract from the Packers. So they do not have like the most talented offensive line. They never have. They don't spend a ton of money. It goes to Trent Williams and his contract, and he helps a lot in that regard. So if you look at the 49ers, they're probably the best example of scheme can overcome things to a certain extent. But then a lot of their issues in the postseason have come when they have to go block Chris Jones for, the Super Bowl, or they have to go block Jalen Carter in the NFC Championship game, etc. You just don't have the guys to go block those guys one-on-one. And so scheme can overcome a lot during the regular season. But when you get into the playoffs, teams can just pick at your weak point. And the 49ers are the best and worst, example there. All right. People asking about Kevin Zeitler in the chat here. Alan asking about him, as well as Mark Davis. I'm not opposed. We talked about Kevin Zeitler last year. I think it makes a lot of sense given the connections to him and his Baltimore days. The reason why he chose Tennessee is that a lot of the other teams were interested in him or on the West Coast, and he apparently does not want to live on the West Coast. If he has changed his mind, I think you can definitely talk about him and bring him potentially in. But I think this is a situation where, I'm interested. Is he interested? We don't really know in that regard. Daniel wants to know if we can send Penny to Duke. I think he already trains with Duke. Him and Trey Smith and that whole group, they were the ones that did that the offensive line masterminds YouTube clips that year for Fox. So Penny already trains with Duke, or at least has in the past. Andre James. Yeah, I guess if they want to bring him back, I'm not super opposed, but I think if the team liked him, they would have given him a chance to actually play, and they never really did that. Let's see. Any other questions in here? You guys can definitely let me know. We'll definitely hit some super chats as well. Mike pointing out, keep an eye out for cap cut offensive linemen. We all know how much Ortiz loves comp picks. Yeah, that definitely is a situation where the Chargers will be active. Or the cap did a recent thing there. We will definitely talk about cut candidates and offensive linemen. We'll see how many of those actually get cut. So Over the Cap did a whole list here, top 100 of the 2026. They put Tyler Biotic. So that's potentially interesting there. Another center adding to that group would be good, at least. At guard, they have Nick Allegretti, Elton Jenkins, Evan Brown. Butch Berry was in Green Bay for a season, so if Elton Jenkins gets cut, I'm definitely interested. It did not go well this past season at center, but he's a really, really good guard that would definitely help the Chargers out. So I would definitely keep an eye on that one, given the connections. Again, scheme overlap here. I wanted Elton Jenkins in the draft that year, would have been nice. But yeah, that's somebody I would definitely have circled for the Chargers if he does get cut, Mr. Elton Jenkins. But their offensive line is like, they're very young. It's very unlike the Packers to do a third contract. So maybe he does get cut, or maybe they just let him play out his contract. But yeah, I would be very interested there if the Chargers are able to get him. They also have Mekhi Becton. James Daniels, the Dolphins guard, is listed as a cut candidate, so potentially one to keep an eye on there. I know he was, pretty good in Chicago as well. They have Patrick McCarry, who the Jaguars just signed. That's an interesting one. And then Graham Glasgow, who he talked about last year with the Lions, Michigan guy. A lot of schematic overlap there. So not a ton of names, but if Elton Jenkins gets cut, you definitely want to keep an eye on that one. All right. I think I'm back up at the chat where I was. Tony Reyes earlier said sign Seumalu, draft Vega, sign Linderbaum. Yeah, I think that's a fine situation for the Chargers. Last name for him, by the way, is Ioane. I've seen and heard some crazy pronunciations in that regard. But Ioane. So just keep that in mind going forward. He posted a video, or he posted a picture, it might have been Duke. That dude carries 330 pounds like insanely well. So yeah, he's a good player. Like, to me, he's worthy of a first round grade and selection. I just think that he would have been a much better fit for Greg Roman than Mike McDaniel. So very interested to see if the Chargers do take him. What does that kind of indicate there? Objectively, a player who is definitely worthy of being selected at 22. I just think that we have done the first round guard thing and we're not able to maximize that first round guard. So if you're taking him, you've got to be able to have a real plan to maximize his ability. And I just don't know. I don't think it's the cleanest fit with Mike McDaniel and the Chargers. But very good player. The film is super clean. Very rarely makes a mistake in pass protection. So I don't dislike Ioane, but I just kind of question how he fits in with Mike McDaniel. Okay, back up to where Tyler mentioned here. Okay. Thomas points out that a lot of Dolphins guys also train with Duke, so definitely some crossover there. The Chargers have a ton of guys who've trained with Duke, so that makes sense for sure. Dylan says he loves the idea of Wyatt Teller plus a day 2 guard behind him. Yeah, if you're signing Wyatt Teller, you definitely have to have a transition plan at that point to figure that part out. Mark Davis asking about Jamari Sawyer. I'm not opposed. I know that I caught some flack in the YouTube comments on Tuesday when I said that he is a better tackle than, or he's a better guard than tackle. I don't see a guy who can consistently play tackle again with the launching points and being able to protect the corner. To me, he's much better suited at guard at his heavier weight specifically. So I know that's not a popular opinion. The PFF grades show otherwise, whatever. I think the film is very clearly better at guard than tackle. I'm not opposed to it. I just think that I'm kind of ready to explore other options. He's dealt with a lot of injuries. He dealt with like 3 or 4 injuries last year. So I'm kind of ready to explore other options. And I think the Chargers are too, honestly. Subway, have I started watching guards? I have. So I have watched Ioane, I watched Emmanuel Pregnon, I watched Chase Pasantis. I've kind of watched Bo Stevens while watching Logan Jones. Who was the other one that I watched recently? I watched Caden Proctor. So Caden Proctor to me is a guard. He's definitely firmly not an offensive tackle. So those are the 4 main ones that I've watched at guard. Chase Pasantis to me is like, he is a perfect fit for Mike McDaniel, and I think he's got fantastic film. I think he's going to test really well. So Chase Pasantis, I've seen like the NFL Stock Exchange guys talked about him in being like the late second. I think he's a really good guard prospect that to me is worthy of a top 40 selection. So I really like Chase Pasantis. I like Ioane. Question the scheme fit. Emmanuel Pregnon is really consistent to me. Did struggle against their best competition, so that is definitely something I would monitor. Specifically in the playoff game, was not pretty. But Lee Hunter is that dude. Love Lee Hunter. So I so far so good. I like these guys, and there's some guys at the Senior Bowl who are not like firmly on my radar that I'll go watch, but it's a good guard class for sure in the draft. Thoughts on Matt Money Smith believe that Slater would make a top center in the league. Is this where did he say this? I didn't hear this on Chargers Weekly. I know that there was some thought coming out of the draft that he would be a center for some teams, but he's one of the top tackles in the league. So I don't know why Slater would want to do that. To me, like and if you move him to center, you're paying him tackle like elite left tackle money to play center. That just doesn't really make sense to me financially. Could he do it? Yeah, absolutely. I think Slater could be an all pro at any position, but he's an all pro at left tackle, and that's where I would like him to stay, assuming he is healthy. Alan wants to know if I think that Joe will actually spend $80 million for Linderbaum. I think that they are desperate enough to solve the offensive line that they would. I think we saw him, do a lot of volume shooting this last year with the problem positions at defensive tackle and skill players specifically. But I think given the connection to Tyler Linderbaum and given the need to really, really solve center, I think he would. I question how much of the Mike McDaniel not spending on offensive line was just given like the cap situation there, or did he not want to do that because they were spending so much money on Tua and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and all those guys? I think Joe Ortiz is going to definitely take a lot of bites at the apple with the offensive line and do his best to make sure that that's not a problem next year going forward. So I think they doubled up in the draft. I think they spent a lot of money in free agency, and they'll solve the offensive line. I trust that. People asking about Najee Harris. We've talked about this before. It's not happening. I think he is much closer to retirement than actually playing meaningful football again. So he's at the age where running backs fall off a cliff in production. The carries are a big concern. He did 4 years in college with a ton of carries, and then you tear your Achilles. So it's just not happening. I am not interested at all. Joker wants to know, could we go all offensive line the first 3 rounds? That would be aggressive for sure. I think the Chargers in this particular draft class are really set up to get an impact defensive lineman at 22. And while I like Ioane and I like Pregnon and I like Basantis, like there's a really good chance that you could get a blue chip edge rusher or defensive tackle at 22. Just given where this draft class is at, I think you want to make sure you're taking the best possible player. And at some point, the offense or the defense needs some high-end draft investments, you guys. Like, I know the offense is a problem, but the defense hasn't really had any high-end premium investments thrown their way. Obviously, that will change given the contracts to Odafe Owe and Khalil Mack and Tuli Tuipulotu, but draft-wise, like they got to start throwing some top 50 picks to the defense at some point. So to me, you look at where the defensive tackle group in particular is and where the edge rusher group is in this draft. I think you can definitely talk yourself into selecting a truly like blue chip defensive tackle or edge rusher there at 22. Maybe trading down changes things. But if Peter Woods makes it to 22 or Caleb Banks makes it to 22, even Lee Hunter, I think, could be an option at 22. All 3 of those guys, I think, are, to me, higher ceiling players than what you're getting at guard in this draft class. So I'm going to have a very hard time passing on any of those 3 guys. Lee Hunter's maybe a little dicey here, but, Peter Woods and Caleb Banks are guys that could be like the next kind of top tier pass rushers. And I know Caleb Banks has some like pad level issues and his run defense isn't like super clean and he was hurt a lot this year. But man, if Peter Woods makes it to 22, I am sprinting to the podium to get that kind of player. Edge rusher, same kind of thing. There's a lot of good players that they could potentially take at 22. So I think just where this draft class is at, the value at 22 is going to be on the defensive side as opposed to the offensive side. And I know Chargers fans will not be happy about that. But yeah, so you go defensive tackle at 22 and then guard center in the next 2 rounds, I think is very fair, depending on like what they want to do with tight end and linebacker and stuff like that. But I want a defensive premium pick at 22, and I want to see what Mike Elston can do with that guy. So that's just me. Thomas Martinez says Jennings dunker at guard. Yeah, I think I've seen that a lot on social media. Just given his issues at tackle, some people have floated him as a first round player. I'm not. I haven't like focused on Dunker, but he did not strike me in passing as like a first round player. But yeah, as a guard in the second round, I think that definitely makes a lot of sense for the Chargers. I hope I'm stuck, brother. Thoughts on moving Bozeman to right tackle? No, they need to get Bozeman off the roster now. Like it's not good. Daniel says Bozeman can move his ass to Bozeman, Montana. That's great. That's great. That is really good rage bait. I appreciate the rage bait super chat from Help I'm Stuck, brother. He also says by moving Bozeman to RT, I mean robust trash can. Nice. Man, I'm not putting your other one on here. That's a little too far for me. I understand the dislike of Bozeman, but I'm not putting that other one on here. But thank you for the 3 super chats. Thomas says Woods would be sick with Tartan Caldwell. I completely agree there. Lee over Vega. Really, I think Lee Hunter, that's a conversation at least. I'm not saying like definitively right now, but Lee Hunter, man, you want to talk about potentially finding like the next Dexter Lawrence? Like that dude is next in line, and his pass rush production and film is really, really good. He can take on double teams. He's a great nose tackle. Is that worthy of taking at pick number 22? I think that's up for debate, but I love Lee Hunter, man. Like he is electric to watch on tape. And you watch what he did against Oregon, you watch what he did against my Utah Utes. Like he wrecked shop against the best teams he played against. And he is definitely somebody I think is first round worthy, for the Chargers at 22. Can you really justify that? How does he fit with Tier Tart and Jamari Caldwell? I think that's a question, but the talent is there for me 100% of the way. Mr. Chow Chow asking about corners. No idea. Have not watched it. I'm probably not watching a lot of corners this year. Just given where the Chargers are at, and I hate watching corner tape. So that's just me. Go Blue wants to know about Caden McDonald at 22. I'm a Buckeye fan, and he was amazing for us. McDonald's a good player, but he doesn't have the same kind of pass rush upside as the other guys. So if they go the other route here, where the Chargers go with one of the guards at 22 and they take McDonald in the second round, if he's there, then that's great. I think McDonald is more of a second round player for me. I think Christian Miller from Georgia is a second round player for me. He's definitely more of a pass rusher than Caden McDonald is. But I would be very interested in either of those guys in the second round. So it's a really good defensive tackle class, you guys. Like this is a great year to need one. And the Chargers, I think, have just been missing that kind of pass rusher who can really, really change things on the interior. Justin Boygby was solid this year. Deshaun Hand was solid this year, but I think they could really use a difference maker in there. And they could get one of those guys at 22. Obviously, a difficult position to transition to. But getting one of those blue chip defensive tackles with Mike Elston is definitely something I'm very interested in. Yeah, I've heard some good things about Grayson Halton as well from OU. This is, again, very good, very deep defensive tackle class. Mighty says that his only question, if it's a good player and you believe in him and they are talented, why do we emphasize what pick they are taken? Who gives a damn? You literally cannot predict anything. Well, I give a damn. I think when you're taking a first round player, there's a lot of financial ramifications of taking that player. And we saw it with Zion Johnson, where I loved Zion Johnson more than anybody. And I think at that point in the draft, if you get an elite player at that position, does it matter as much? No. But when you're taking a first round pick, you're taking him with the plan of having the 5th year option picked up, and then you're paying him top tier money. If it doesn't work out, the return on investment is just not as high. So it's that really is what matters here for the Chargers and for general drafting, is that yeah, you draft good players, but if you are not drafting a premium position, you have to get high end return to justify that means. It's why the safety position has been undervalued all the time in the NFL draft, where Kyle Hamilton falls to 14, Derwin James to 17, Brian Branch to the 2nd round, Cooper DeJean, who was a slot corner and safety hybrid, falls to the 2nd round because it's a financial ramification where if you don't get surplus value with a first round pick at a non-premium position, it just hurts your team more than what you're getting out of a, if you draft a left tackle and he's, average, you can still justify taking him in the first round because it helps your return on an investment. So it's just about premium positions and battling that fact. And I think we're at the point where defensive tackle is becoming a premium position, and you look at the market and all these guys who are changing the game, that's what that becomes. So if you're picking a non-premium position in the first round, you have to get a hit, or otherwise it's just, you're wasting a first round pick essentially. And yes, I do agree that Brian Branch the second was outrageous. He was a top 10 player for me. I loved Brian Branch. But the league cares a lot about return on investment and positional value. And, Creed Humphrey fell to 62nd or whatever it was in the draft, and he was a top 10 player that year. And very clearly like the best interior offensive line. So draft positioning matters a lot for future contractual purposes and return on investment purposes. So that's kind of where I'm at. Help, I'm stuck, brother. Stepbrother says, serious question, do we keep Fisk or Matlock? So Matlock is under contract. I don't think he's going to fit what they want at fullback, what Mike McDaniel wants at fullback. I think you could see him tweak some things away from the Kyle Juszczyk, Alec Ingold size and physical profile, but going to Matlock is a full other swing here. Fisk does enough as a wide tight end, and he's a restricted free agent, so he'll be free. He does enough where I'm okay, with him coming back. And at the worst case scenario, he's your 4th tight end. Maybe you cut him in training camp and he's your practice squad tight end kind of deal. But that gives you a nice little backstop at tight end where he can take care of all your blocking needs and just be that kind of, security blanket in that sense. Matlock, I would be very surprised if he's on the roster in week 1. Like, he is a bad defensive tackle. He's made a lot of strides at fullback, but it's just not a fit for what Mike McDaniel historically wants. And, again, you don't have to be 240 pounds, but they move their fullback around so much in motion and as running routes and things like that. So it's just not a fit. So for me, Matlock is a cut candidate 100%. And Fisk, I think you bring back, and at minimum, he's your tight end 4. Thomas says trade Matlock to the Giants. Yeah, especially if they hire Greg Roman and run game coordinator like that. So yeah, if they can get a pick for Scott Matlock, Joe Ortiz deserves a raise, man. Yeah, that'd be crazy. Imagine Downs falling to 22. That would be insanity. I don't think they would take him, but he supposedly is not going to test that well, so he might fall. But the film is great. Like, he is a great safety prospect. SoCal Supercharger wants to know if I think that Minter recommended O'Leary as his replacement. I would have to imagine that they spoke very highly of him when he was when they were both in the building together. So there's a very strong connection between O'Leary and Minter, and I think the Chargers are benefiting there. So yeah, would not surprise me. TD asking about Skylar Gill Howard. Haven't focused on him directly. Watching Lee Hunter a lot more there, but Skylar Gill Howard is definitely another like run stuffing guy that I'm interested in. But potentially, that's more like a round 3, round 4 conversation in my opinion. Whereas Lee Hunter has like high end pass rushing traits to take advantage of. Joker asking about a new punter in free agency. That's definitely an Alex Katzen question. So J.K. Scott is a free agent. I'm not gonna lie, I don't know a ton about these punter free agents, but there's a lot of them apparently. So it wouldn't surprise me either way if he was back or if the Chargers, decided to explore other options here. The list of free agent punters is very long. Michael Dixon from Seattle, Logan Cook in Jacksonville, AJ Cole with the Raiders, Jack Fox. Or wait, is just this? Am I looking at free agency? No, this is just punter contracts. Excuse me. I'm looking at the wrong list. My bad. Let's go free agents. Okay. So J.K. Scott is actually not a free agent. That's my mistake. He is under contract. If they wanted to explore punter contracts, Tommy Townsend, Bradley Pinion from Atlanta, Tress Way from Washington, Braden Mann from the Eagles, Jake Bailey from the Dolphins. So there are some other options. My guy Mitch Wishnowsky from the Bills. Shout out Utah legend there. But let's look at J.K. Scott's contract now that we're talking about this. So JK has $0 guaranteed dollars on his 2026 contract, which is not the craziest thing in the world for a punter. He's got a $2.35 million base salary and a 3.8 cap hit. The Chargers would save $2.8 million if they cut him. I don't know. I think that's more about what Ryan Ficken wants. And Ryan Ficken is always going to prioritize hang time, and J.K. Scott has the second highest hang time in the league. So I think that Scott probably stays another year. Have not watched any wide receivers yet. I watched like Mekhi Lemon in passing, but he's a really good player. But yeah, I don't know. Thomas Martinez says the best punter target in college football was Harbaugh's punter on the national championship team. Something to keep in mind there. So that means he's probably going to get drafted then, I assume. Thomas. SoCal Supercharger asking about McDaniel and comp picks. So the rule for the NFL is that you have to be on a team for 2 years. So Robert Saleh is not giving the 49ers any comp picks this year, for example, because he was only back in San Francisco for 1 year. So has to be 2 years, unfortunately, for the Chargers. Carlos, what about long snapper? Is Josh Harris going to be back? I think if Josh Harris wants to continue playing, I think you absolutely bring him back. He is definitely getting up there in age. He loves to golf. He loves being at dads, but you definitely felt his value when he was back. So if he wants to keep playing, I think you bring him back for sure. No, we do not get comp picks for Jesse Minter. Jesse Minter is white. Comp picks is only for minority coaches. All right. Hour 15 for you guys. Solo video. Hopefully, Tyler's doing well. If he's still in the chat, wish him, speedy recovery there. We appreciate you guys for sticking around on a solo video. About 300 of you guys on a Saturday morning by myself. So that is greatly, greatly appreciated. We will be back to our normal schedule next week, assuming Tyler has returned to positive health. So we'll see you guys on Tuesday. Enjoy the Super Bowl weekend. Eat some good food. Stay safe. If you're drinking, make sure you don't drive. All that good stuff. Check out PrizePicks. Have a great weekend. And we appreciate you guys so much. We'll see you next time. As always, Bolts up.